you guys know her. She's here today, and she just shared with me that she's Linda Good, which makes me Linda the Great.
I'll remember that.
I'm going to remember that too, I think. I'm not Linda the Bad. Exactly.
Do you require your title at all times?
Linda the Great. I love it. Okay, so, we like to have themes for the month. And so when thinking about that, told the others that I wanted to do a talk about uh, peripheral exercise, like stuff for your hands and feet. So that's where this started. And then Linda Good said she wants to talk about heat and mental health issues. So that seemed kind of extreme to me. So now I've stretched this talk. So we are going to talk about hands and feet, but we're also going to talk about extremes, exercise extremes, because it's actually pretty interesting. And I'm not accusing anyone in here of actually doing extreme exercise, but I'm sure you know people that do that. So this is a talk on exercise, and this is review. Gonna make that go away. So, we're all participating in the things that we do here, all these behaviors that relate to taking care of ourselves, how we eat, being active, practicing other behaviors like being mindful, etc. So those all, I assume we're doing those because we're hoping those are going to help us, live longer and be more healthy in our waning years. So our lifestyle does have a big impact on our health, and we want to have basically a healthy lifestyle, which includes being active, uh, being physical. And so as many as 250,000 deaths per year are attributable because people who basically are not active. And there's all kinds of uh, literature research showing that people that are having active lifestyles basically have the ones that are the most protected throughout their lifespan. So exercise basically protects people against heart disease, against other chronic diseases like diabetes, hypertension, osteoporosis, and even cancers. So being physically active, cognitive should be on that list too, okay? And so the greatest potential for us, living a long time is being active. And experts agree that most physical decline that older people suffers comes not because they got older, but basically because they quit doing stuff from lack of use. So the Harvard alumni study, that was one of the big studies, those burning 2,000 calories per week suffered only half the annual mortality of sedentary people, and mostly because they had less heart disease. So if you did any sort of
On that last slide, you said something about 2,000 calories a week.
we'll talk about that. It is, I agree. It's not very many.
Oh, burning that.
That's exercise calories. We'll get to that. So this is the CDC recommendations for what older people should do in terms of being active. So this is how much activity this CDC is recommending that you need 150 minutes per week of moderate intensity activity, such as 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week. So walking, brisk walking, water aerobics, cycling, any of these cardiovascular activities, are you accumulating 30 minutes a day, at least 5 days a week, so that you're getting 150 minutes a week of exercise. That's the CDC's recommendation. And they also now recommend that 2 days a week you do some sort of strength training activity. And this is for the older people, that you do stuff to improve your balance. So if you hang out with me at all, we're doing sort of all of that, right? We lift some weights, we do many different balance improving activities, standing on one leg, standing up from a sitting position, all kinds of things. So that's the recommendations from the CDC, and their encouragement is to try activities that combine all three areas. So dancing would be a good example of an activity that's cardiovascular sustained, where you probably are shifting your weight, doing balance activities, and standing on one foot for part of the time. And also there would be a strength component just from lifting yourself around, etc. So that would be a good choice if that was one of your choices. So that's what the CDC recommends. And then this is basically the prevalence of that. So about 25% of the population actually does that. Okay, so that means that 75% of the population doesn't do that. So that's in California, the number is 24, which is significantly higher than the US average, which was 23. So it's only a couple. The number now I think is 25 compared to 24. So it's certainly better than it was, but it could be better than it is. And we always diss Mississippi and Alabama because those are the two states where the health patterns are the worst, and they indeed are only like 13% in Mississippi. Anyway, so that's the recommendation and then the observation of that. And so this is your question, Glenn. So there's definitely sort of a dose response that the more exercise you do, the better is going to be your health benefit. So if you do nothing, there's no benefit. If you do a little bit, there's more benefit. And if there's this 2,000 calories per week where you sort of plateau out, and so between 2 to 3,000 calories, there's not a whole lot of more benefit by going 3,000 as opposed to 2,000, but a little bit. So if you thought about calories per week, 2,000 calories, this is calories spent doing activity. And there's lots of different ways to look at that. One way is just by miles. And if you are walking, it's pretty common, pretty on the average, you're going to expend about 100 calories for every mile that you do. So if you walk 2 miles, that's 200 calories. If you walk 10 miles, that would be 2,000 calories, right? So is that right? 1,000. So you'd have to walk 20 miles to get 2,000 calories. So if you thought about what you're doing in a week's time, are you doing activity comparable to walking 10 miles? So if you walk 2 miles a day and you do that 5 days a week, you're halfway there. If you walk 4 miles a day and you do that 5 days a week, you're going to get there. Most of us are not taking 4-mile walks, I don't think. But so anything contributes to this, but that's the amount of activity that relates to 2,000 calories a week would be about 20 miles walked. And there's other things you're doing that fit into that. You know, you could be swimming, you could be on a machine, you could be working out in your yard, whatever it is you're doing. But are you doing something that's comparable to about 20 miles a week?
If it's a brisk walker, so.
The intensity is not the issue. It's the movement, the duration. Okay, so let's get rid of this somehow.
Yeah, I used to worry about that because I used to play most of them, I go from that walk. But just getting out there and walking works.
Yeah. Okay, so now we're going to get to the extreme part. So the observation obviously that people who exercise regularly have markedly lower rates of disability and they live longer. It's 7 years longer than that of their physically inactive contemporaries. But there is a safe upper dose limit to all this, right? So that doesn't mean if you can do 20 miles a week, if you did 40, is that going to be twice as good? And if you could do 60, is that even better? So no, there is a sort of a diminishing return, and there's an upper safety dose limit that's out there, and that's what we're going to talk about. So if you're working too hard, then there's some adverse effects that could be coming on, which is going to outweigh the benefits if you're overdoing it, basically. And I'm not accusing anybody of overdoing it in our population because we're smarter than that, basically. But I have some examples of extreme activities. So a big one is CrossFit. Okay, CrossFit is a sort of a gym kind of routine thing. And one of the popular CrossFit workouts is called the Murph Challenge. Have you ever done the Murph Challenge, Sharon?
No.
So if you're doing the Murph Challenge, you run a mile, you do 100 pull-ups, 200 push-ups, 300 squats, and then you run another mile while you're wearing a 25-pound vest. So that does sound
I only do that.
that does sound slightly extreme. You've done 100 pull-ups?
Yeah,
Okay. So Sharon's indicating that there's always, like everything we do, there's workarounds. And I'm sure the hardcore guys are truly doing 100 pull-ups. And if you need help, you use some sort of machine that basically offloads some of your body weight a little bit. 200 push-ups. Can you do 200 push-ups?
but the way they do it, class they'll have you do like 15 push-ups and then go like 10 kettlebells. come back and push it, yeah. So, yes, but the 10 at a time.
Right, right. So you need to ask your coach, are you truly doing a Murph challenge or is a modified Murph, it sounds like. She's doing a modified Murph. Anyway, that's pretty extreme. And that's some pretty high loads on your body weight to do it.
On the chair. Oh, yeah, oh, there's
I'm not, I know nobody's saying you should do 200 push-ups. I'm just saying this is an example of an extreme workout. Another example of an extreme activity is ultramarathoners. I used to be married to an ultramarathoner. And so that means it's more than a marathon. So a marathon is 26.2 miles. So there's lots of events out there that are 50 and 100 miles. And obviously, if you thought about covering 50 or 100 miles in one stretch, that's pretty much an all-day activity. Doing anything for, 18, 20 hours, obviously is on the extreme side. Okay. So you have to be in shape for that. You have to run all the time. My husband would run all day Saturday and then run all day Sunday, and that's how he trained. Go to Winters and back. And he hasn't run since, by the way. But I'm just saying it's extreme, okay? Another extreme example, you've heard of this before. You probably know some people that do it, these Ironman triathlons, where triathlon mean there's 3 events. So there's a run, there's a swim, there's a bike, and they're long. So it's a 2.4-mile swim, 112-mile bike ride, and then a full marathon, 26 miles. And again, that's pretty much an all-day endeavor. The average athlete takes 10 to 17 hours to complete. And I'm sure there are other athletes not quite so average who spend a lot longer than that. And I have no idea what the actual time would be.
5 hours for the elite.
5 hours?
Five,
That's probably hard to believe. But whatever, it's extreme. It's definitely extreme. Another weightlifting exercise that's an extreme category is a strongman thing, which you see this stuff on TV all the time, right? These things do. This is more of a cross the tire flips, Atlas stone loading, vehicle pulling, heavy farmer's walk. So lots of explosive power, lots of muscle stuff, lots of heavy joint loading that most of us are smart enough to not even want to try. Another extreme activity would be stuff like climbing Mount Everest. And maybe you know some people that have done that before, but doing this high altitude mountaineering where you're trying to, bag some peak that's got an incredible altitude load to it. Obviously, that's extreme, and you're putting yourself up to all kinds of physiological issues related to whether you need to do it or not, in addition to just having the conditioning to be able to walk that much. So the things that sort of happen, so chronic, intense, and sustained exercise can cause some issues that people that are doing these sort of excessive things are basically possibly doing some damages to their heart. So people that are doing this a lot have been found to have this fibrosis in their myocardial structures. And here's a list of the structures. And they're also have calcifications of their arteries. Their hearts don't pump as effectively as they used to. They have this diastolic dysfunction, and their artery walls get stiffer just because of the chronic stress that they're putting their heart under by trying to do these extreme things. And veteran endurance athletes in sports such as ultramarathon running, professional cycling have been noted to have a 5-fold increase in the prevalence of AFib. I thought that was pretty interesting. And they have more of these enzymes because they're inducing damage to their myocardial structure. So they're going to have more enzyme leakage. So they're going to have these markers, these troponin levels and stuff that are higher just because of the fact that they're using their heart muscle so in such a rigorous fashion. So you can't do that kind of extreme stuff and not expect it to have a physiological consequence related to work in your heart. And then you always, hear about sudden death, people that die doing an activity. So in 2010, it was estimated there were 500,000 runners who did a marathon in the US, and the sudden death rate is low, 1 event per 100 participants, but that means every year there's about 5 people that die during a marathon. Okay. And although the participant rate has not changed, it's higher because there's more people running these things, I guess. But at any rate, so there is a potential issue for working your heart so hard that basically you have a heart attack and you don't survive it. Um, and the causes of sudden cardiac death during or after extreme exercise in people that are young typically is because they have some sort of genetic abnormality going on where they've got hypertrophic cardiomyopathies, they have anomalous arteries, they have some congenital electrical things going on, this prolonged QT syndrome. When people are over 30, when they're adults, then their reasons for having sudden cardiac death are more related to heart disease kinds of issues. Uh, they have ischemia, they have blockages in their arteries they don't know about, and they stress themselves and basically, suffer the consequences. Uh, the final mile of the marathon course is the hardest. And that's where most of the people basically end up dying, is during the last mile. And the fatality rate for triathlons is approximately twice that of marathons, because I guess more people have events when they're in the water and they drown. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't do these events because you're going to have a heart attack. And the other thought I was having looking at these numbers is this notion of dying during a marathon. And if somebody dies during a marathon, that's potentially where they wanted to die, right? They wanted to die doing what they love. So maybe that was their choice to figure out, okay, this is it's my time and this is how I'm going to spend it and this is what I'm going to do, and dying, going out in glory in the final mile of a marathon might be somebody's uh bucket list item. I don't have a clue, but I'm not saying we should be sad because people die during marathons, but I guess it does happen. Exactly. You want to live till you die, and that's you can say something.
Oh, there was a story about a guy that retired very young, like the group to Monterey and indulged his passion for surfing.
Uh-huh.
Something like 40 years later, he was out surfing, had a heart attack, and that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the way to do it.
No, exactly. If you thought about how you wanted to die, you probably do want to doing something that you love. And if marathon runners, maybe that's the ticket. I don't have any judgment there. I'm just mentioning that. Okay, so this is I think a helpful picture to looking at this notion of having a benefit from being active, and how the more you do, the better the benefit. And so if you're doing this as the CDC recommends, this 150 minutes a week, doing stuff that's moderate and vigorous, you're basically getting the best benefit. And this is the risk here. So the risk is relatively low as long as you're staying sort of in these safe ranges. And then again, the harder you do, you might tweak a bit more benefit out of it. If you can do more vigorous stuff, increase that dose. But the more you increase the dose, the more you're going to increase the risk of something, hurting yourself, damaging muscle cell walls, those kinds of things. And so the risk goes up, the harder you work, the benefit goes up to a point, but there is sort of again, this diminishing return here. And if you're working so hard, those extreme kinds of things, basically the benefits are not going to be as worth probably the extra stress of the risk. That's the notion of extreme exercise. So I'm just throwing this in here just in case possibly you are in this pushing yourself category. And so here's some signs of to be mindful of to make sure that you're not, quote, overdoing it. So if you're all of a sudden realizing that you can't do the same things that you used to do because, it's your pace is lower, or you used to do 3 miles and now you only do 2 miles and then you're too tired to continue, that's a sign that maybe you're overdoing a little bit. And if you need more rest to recover between stuff. And then other sort of psychological issues and not sleeping well, being so extra sore, or injuring yourself is something to certainly be mindful of. And are you getting sick more often? And how are you feeling about it? So just be mindful of that. And again, I don't think that there are too many people here in our environment that are guilty of overdoing it. But maybe in some other phases of your life, you did fall into that category. We actually do have some goals for you if you're working here. And so in which basically align with those CDC recommendations that you're somewhere in your life, you're getting at least 30 minutes of cardiovascular activity, hopefully at least 5 days a week. So that would be the 150 minutes. And if you're coming in here 3 days a week and doing less than 30 minutes each time, are you doing something the days that you're not coming in here? Or are you doing enough exercise in here that you could say you're getting 150 minutes of activity? Most of you probably are, especially if you're coming 3 days a week. But the strength training is super important. The older we get, the more I think that's important that you're doing something to stress those muscles, and the flexibility and balance activities again are also important too, the older we get. So those are the goals for our program. And wherever you do these goals, again, is an individual thing. If you're participating in stuff here, you're doing this. And if you're choosing to not do some of the things here, that's certainly your choice, but as long as you're doing these on your own somewhere else, that's what matters. Are you doing it? I wanted to also talk about high intensity interval training, because that's actually another tool that fits into the exercise perspective. And if you thought about it, if you're doing a high intensity interval bout, that means you're working really hard. And is that extreme or not? And I guess it sort of is, but there's definitely a place for doing some high intensity interval periods doing your cardiovascular workout if that appeals to you. And if you're doing a short burst of high intensity work, that means you're working really hard. You're getting your heart rate up higher than it normally is. And since you're working super hard, you're very anaerobic, you can't do it very long. So it's going to be seconds that you're doing it, maybe 10 seconds, maybe 15 seconds, maybe 20 seconds. And if you're doing this burst of extra strength, extra hard work, then you need some recovery time as well. So one interval approach would be, to do a hard bout for part of a minute, 10, 15, 20 seconds, and then rest the whole rest of the minute and possibly repeat that. That's again how you approach the intervals. Some of the machines have, these interval settings where they'll bump the resistance up and down as you're doing it, and those are choices. But again, it's an individual thing, but there is a little bit of encouragement to, if you're doing cardiovascular exercise, to think about, are there ever times when you're doing a little burst just to get your heart rate up? There's benefit to that. And how you apply that, whether it's 10 minutes, 10 seconds, 15 seconds, a whole minute, those are personal choices. And the longer you're doing it, obviously you're going to be able to sustain those higher levels longer. So you do build up to it. There's some approaches there. And obviously these approaches are used all the time in, athletic training. People that are doing high level competitions and doing sports, track stars, etc. They do a lot of intervals. And there is some benefit to doing intervals, I'm saying, and it's not truly extreme because it's short-lived and it's not the whole approach to your entire workout. And the ways you can.
So for most of us in this program, how do you know what your maximum heart rate is?
Well, you test it. You do a maximal effort and see what your heart rate is. And that could be by doing a graded exercise test with your doctor, or if you ever are climbing a flight of stairs and you know that that's as hard as you can work, what is your heart rate when you're doing that? So there are ways to know that your heart rate is beating as fast as it's going to go. And the average is 220 minus your age. But has a huge standard deviation. So 220 minus your age, if you're 80 years old, that would be 140, right? But plus or minus 10 or 20 beats. So if you're 80 years old, your max heart rate is somewhere between 120 and 160, most likely. And you sort of measure that. But then on top of that, a lot of you take beta blockers, medicines that lower your heart rate. So that's going to enter in, and your heart rate's not going to be you're not gonna be able to attain your true maximum heart rate if you take a medicine like metoprolol that's lowering your heart rate overall. So then you want to know what your max heart rate is on your medicines, which again, having a graded exercise test, which aren't in vogue as much as they used to be, or doing some maximal effort climbing a flight of stairs, seeing what it is, you can kind of figure it out. So ways you can add intensity, one way is to go faster. So if you're walking, you could speed it up a little bit. If you're cycling, you could speed it up a little bit. If you're doing whatever you're doing, you could try just basically pushing the pace. And you can also add intensity by resistance. So you can add incline on a treadmill, you can go up a hill, you can go up some stairs. On some machines, you can bump up the resistance, like on a bike. And I thought this was kind of an interesting, increasing the impact as another way to put more intensity on. So basically, do a little jogging burst if you're walking, or doing some stopping and doing some jumping jacks. I'm not sure I'd recommend that one, but those would boost up the intensity level for sure. And studies consistently show that adding a burst of intensity is going to improve your heart function. It's going to help you get to a higher level of cardiovascular fitness if you can do some intervals. And if you can't really worry about that. And it's not, doesn't mean that you should always do intervals. It's just another thing to add to your whole picture. And it does have some benefit to it. Moreover, the other benefit from doing an interval approach is time. That if you don't have a whole lot of time to do on a given day, if you just thought about working harder for a shorter amount of time, there is benefit to that. So working harder for a shorter period of time is better than not working at all. So if you have a normal routine where you walk 30 to 60 minutes and on a given day you don't have that much time, if you wanted to do a short 10-minute workout, and if you could spend part of it doing it in a higher intensity, that will be to your benefit physiologically. But you still need a well-rounded program that you're doing all this stuff and accumulating all those minutes, etc. So any more questions about exercise? I threw this in here, says this bird is taking a rest, right? I cramped up and I needed a few minutes rest, if you don't mind. And luckily there was a whale sitting by where he could take a little rest. So in this whole picture, rest is super important. And if you're doing things and you're stressing muscles and you're stressing your heart, you do need to give yourself adequate recovery, because that's part of the picture of how you get better. It's not, yes, you want to stress it, and yes, you want to recover from it.
You can do so many exercises every day. It seems to me you must succeed with that. Because if it's stretching, you can do more, but there's no limit to how much stretching, slow movements, do.
Correct. Are you talking me personally or just in general?
Oh, and check.
You're superwoman.
Linda the Great.
I'm blessed, Leonie, that I'm not doing as much as I used to. I'm pretty comfortable doing 2 workouts a day now, when I used to have to do 4. So but stretching is pretty benign. Stretching actually is not all day, but is not an extreme activity. You should be able to stretch a lot. Okay, so I did want to spend some time talking about our extremities. So that's again where I was starting with this. So totally switching gears here. So I'm going to talk about things that you're doing. So your extremities basically are your limbs, right? Your arms and your legs. And your distal extremities would be your hands and feet and your ankles. So there's a lot of value in doing things for your extremities, right? Those are parts of your body that you don't think about very often, but they do indeed need to be able to move and to help you do things. So some anatomy here, there's lots of muscles in your hand, and there's lots of muscles in your ankle and your feet, okay? So these are just 2 examples of all the muscles related to these individual little digits. And proprioception is a big part of your extremity training. And that's an important concept that we don't think about very often because it is a subconscious activity. Okay, so proprioception means that your sort of joints know where they are in space. Okay, and they make little adjustments. And so it's that's how we stand on one leg, is because our ankle knows to hold us up and to make adjustments to keep our weight and our center of gravity in one place or not. And all of our joints do this. We think about it mostly in our feet because in our ankles, because those are the ones if your proprioception is messed up. And those extremities, obviously, there's a balance issue and you're going to fall down. But you also have proprioception in your hands and in your shoulders, and um, you don't think about those so much because obviously if you lose the proprioceptive ability of your shoulder to know where it is, you're still going to stand up and not be on the butt, you're on the ground. So we don't even have this notion that you need proprioception in all these other joints, but you do. And obviously the people that need it more are the people that use these extra, like baseball players, obviously have to have a good ability to know where their shoulders are if they're going to be performing their sport very well. Okay. And obviously, if you hurt yourself, then that's part of the process of the things that you need to do to get better. And here's just a little an anatomical picture showing how this is this feedback loop, right? So the joints are the things that know where they are, but obviously they're communicating through your nervous system to your brain to basically tell yourself to stay upright, because even though your ankle is now 10 degrees lower than it was before, you still want to keep your head in the same place so that you don't fall down. Okay. So your body's pretty clever in knowing all this. So if you thought about all the different parts of fitness that matter, flexibility means that your joints can go through their range of motion. Strength means that you can exert tension and you can go through that range of motion and get some resistance. So those are two important components of fitness that certainly relate to your extremities, the flexibility in them and the strength that they have. And balance is just, keeping upright. And we just talked about that proprioception, where the joint knows where it is. So another little, just so you know some terminology with respect to movement. So when you're flexing, you're taking a joint and you're reducing the angle. So going from here to here, my wrist is flexing. And when it's extending, the angle's getting bigger. So triceps extension is this angle getting bigger. Biceps is the flexion motion. So those are two important terms to understand: flexing and extending. And your wrist can also do this pronation, supination thing. And a little deviation here. So that radial and ulnar, those refer to the bones. And then your foot does the same thing. So it flexes and it extends, but in your foot, they call it plantar flexion and dorsiflexion, which is really the ankle is extending. And then they move to the side and they also turn in and out. Those are just movement terms, okay? And so in your hand, you want your hand to be flexible because you're using these joints a lot, right? And so there's things you can do to make sure that your hand flexibility is adequate. And we very seldom do hand exercises. I used to in the chair class. They're kind of fun. And if you thought about things you can do, and if you've ever had a hand issue and you went to PT with a hand therapist, I'm sure you've done some of this stuff where you did these movements where you tried to put your hand in different positions and sort of maintain that flexibility. This one's really fun to think about it because it's your brain. If you took your hand and you thought about just my index finger, I'm going to flex it. And my middle finger, I'm going to flex it. And my ring finger, and my pinky, and my thumb. So those are actually hard to do, right? You got to think about it. And I have some restricted movement in a lot of my finger joints here. So I should do more flexibility hands maneuvers for my hands is my lesson there. Here's just some other examples of things to do for your hands. If you thought about your wrists, the same notion. You want to flex them and extend them. And to keep the flexibility there so your wrist can go through its range of motion. And you can also do specific wrist strengthening exercises if you thought that was a particular need for you. So anybody here ever go through carpal tunnel or hand wrist surgery kind of things? So poor Debbie has a lot of issues with that contracture thing. I don't know if you ever noticed her hands, and she's going through it again with her other hand now, where you get these tight things, and basically that totally messes up the flexibility in one finger. And she's been through the mill with respect to trying to treat those and to make that go away. And she's gone through surgeries, etc. So it's challenging, and you want to keep this flexibility the best you can and not have those issues. This one's really fun, and I encourage you to try this at home. If you thought about your ankle, that's a place where you want some flexibility. And so this is just a test you can do to measure the flexibility of your ankle, which is basically to get that. I'm going to add this to my little assessment bout here. If you kneel next to the wall and you have your foot about 3 inches from the wall, can you touch your knee toward the wall? So is your ankle bent enough to let you get this forward reach? And if you can do that, and then you measure it back. So basically you measure how far back can you go and get your knee to touch the wall. So how much distance can you have between your foot and the wall to measure this angle of the flexibility that you can have. So if you do that, and here's describing it, you start at 3 inches, see if you can do that. 3 inches is okay, then you try to back it up and measure how many inches it takes for you to basically not be able to touch the wall. And so if you're able to back up 5 inches or more, that means you have some good flexion in your ankle. And if you're below 3 inches and they're also your feet are very significantly different, then obviously you have some ankle mobility issues. I need to do this on myself. I know I have ankle mobility issues, especially on my left side. So that's just kind of fun and something you could do on your own to see, are your ankles flexible enough? And there's stuff you can do to help your flexibility. And again, it all has to do with taking joints through their range of motion. So doing exercises where you're flexing and extending, inverting. Tracing the alphabet is another good flexibility exercise for your ankles. Strengthening your ankles kind of makes sense too. And there's lots of ways to do that. And using a resistance band is kind of helpful. And so this exercise here, having this band around this foot, and if he pulls out this way, he's using these ankle muscles here on the side of his foot to strengthen that. And if you do it the other way, so pull to the inside, pull to the outside, it's harder to figure out how to pull it this way because you have to tether it on the outside, but there are ways to do that. And basically those are resistance exercises that are focusing on the strength of these side muscles on your shin. And somebody asked me, well, why do I care about those? And it's so you can walk, okay? Every step you take, your foot needs to do things. And if you're going to walk more effectively, if you have good flexibility, can get your foot up, and you have the strength to basically, pull yourself through each stride that you're doing. So your ankles are paramount to your ability to walk. And my opinion is most of us want to be able to walk as much as we can. We want to be able to keep walking, right? So I'm encouraging you to spend some time thinking about your own personal situation with respect to your feet and your ankles, because that's a function that you want to maintain. It's important for balance too. And there's any exercise all has to do with what does the joint do? How does it move? Does it go up and down? Does it go side to side? And you want to think about maintaining that flexibility and doing some strength stuff to basically keep your ability to push up. So doing toe raises, heel raises, those all are good strength exercises to keep your ankle muscles in good shape. And you can do it just standing next to the wall. You can do it with resistance. You could do it with an ankle weight, and do things that way. There's lots of different choices there. And if you've ever had any sort of PT, you've done some of this. And here's some more examples. Here's with an ankle weight. If you had an ankle weight, you could wrap it around your foot and basically do that side to side stuff, as long as you had your foot in a place Here he's laying on his side so that the foot can go side to side. I mean, that's hard to do. You have to wrap your head around how's the joint going to move? What position can I be in to let my joint move? And what position am I going to be in so that I can pull against resistance when I'm in that position, which is where the bands kind of enter in. So in this example, you could be having a band maybe down here on this side, and then somebody else holding it up here so you could pull down against it. There's always ways to do it, but you do have to wrap your head around it. And this also goes for your feet as well. Okay, so there's your ankles, your feet matter. And we love this picture of me with my toe lifted. Don't ask me how that happened, but using your toes helps. And so keeping strength in your toes helps you. And Carrie can relate to this pretty well because she hurt her toe and couldn't walk for 2 days, right? So your toes are super important. So keep your strength up in your toes, keep your flexibility up in your toes, which means that you do things with them, you bend them, you use them, and you try to do resistance with them.
Taking up markers.
Sure, sure. So with respect to, our hands and our feet, there's stuff you can do that fits into this that's going to help you. So if you do activities with your hands, like you knit or you crochet or even doing puzzles, or you're playing the piano and you play an instrument, you have to use your fingers for that, right? So that's going to help maintain the fitness of your fingers, basically, if you use them. So whatever the activities that you like to do, just think about that. How am I maintaining the flexibility of my extremities here because of the way I'm using these given things that I'm doing? That's helpful. Even playing video games fits into that picture. And with your feet, there's lots of stuff you do with your feet too. You walk, that's one of the most paramount ones. Maybe you paint with them. Maybe you do other things. And we do a lot of activities standing on one leg, which basically also uses your feet, but they're good balance things as well. And I wanted to throw in the happy baby pose only because it's one of my favorite maneuvers and has less to do with your feet than your hips. This is just a great hip stretch. But if you thought about, your feet are going to matter here. And so we did the happy baby today, and you liked it, right, Marjorie? It is one of my favorite stretches. So that's a good one. And then on the feet mode, I just couldn't resist. There's all kinds of things you can do with your feet unrelated to their fitness level. But one of my favorite Christmas decorations is the reindeer print I have of my kids that they made when they were like 8 and 10 of their feet and their hands. That's a good one. The mistletoe is kind of cute too. And I never thought about Halloween decorations with your feet, but here's some examples. If you ever wanted to be so inclined to do something with your feet. Okay, so that's the end. I exercise regularly so I can withstand the stress of exercising regularly. All right, thank you. Comments, questions? So use your,
Is something recommended for like a level of training?
is what?
Is a good recommended level for training
Is what?
zone 2?
I don't know, what does zone 2 mean?
Getting your heart rate up to zone 1, zone 2, and zone 3.
Those are meaningless to me.
Ultra athlete going.
And how is that orange, red, and yellow? I know there's like Julia, our nurse on Fridays, that goes to a gym called the Orange Therapy.
Yeah.
And that's about getting your heart rate to a moderate level and working hard enough to be in this orange zone, but not so hard that you're in the red zone. And
Curious that zone 2 is the quickest way to get fitter.
I know nothing about zone 2. I'll have to look into that.
What percent of your maximal heart rate is zone 2?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Yeah.
You have to, there's a formula for it, but it's really popular in cycling.
Okay, I will share. So I spent 30 years at UC Davis as an exercise physiologist, and a big part of my job was doing graded exercise tests on people and measuring their max heart rate and saying, okay, this is your max heart rate, this is how much work you can do. So we would give them an exercise prescription, which was a target heart rate, saying, okay, when you're working out, you should get your heart rate up to 110, 120 beats per minute, or 90, 95, whatever it was for them. It was individualized. And those levels were set at like 75% of their maximum work level. Okay, so that was our exercise prescription, was a target heart rate set at a moderate level of intensity. And then that was part of the, they're monitored, so we're looking at their heart rate all the time. And we did that all the time. That was our program, was giving these exercise prescriptions and helping people attain them.
Well, that's what it's down to, 60 to 70% of you.
Okay. But I will share. So in my encore career here now, working with the extension of that is I almost never look at anybody's heart rate. The thing that matters is, are you moving? Okay. Doesn't matter. Are you working hard enough? Are you moving? Okay. That's my goal, is to keep you moving. And if you're getting to 60% of your max heart rate or 80% or 100, that's an individual choice. And going back to the interval discussion, yes, there's some benefit to doing a burst here and there to getting it to a higher level, but we're not actually measuring it to see whether you did that. That's on you to keep track of that stuff if that's something that you want to do. The thing that truly does matter is just continued movement and tolerating it and doing the things that you need to do to maintain your function, which is keeping strong, keeping flexible, and keeping active. So I'm just sharing, that's my perspective on life anymore.
Recall seeing a documentary years ago of a woman who was born in her arms, and she learned to ride with her feet, beach, and then swim that
Mm-mm.
learn how to do everything to do with their hands. So
Yeah, well, she didn't have any choices. Yeah.
I just recall seeing that. I often try to see if I can pick things up on my feet. And I can't. Depend on-
We have a guy here painting with his feet. That's pretty clever, don't you think? Where'd that picture go?
I had a job many millions of years ago, and the guy in the office with no arms, taught sight with his toes.
Yeah,
He's faster than me.
yeah. You do what you have to, basically. Kudos to him. We can stop the recording.
You ever, I'm sorry,
No.
you ever sort of like exercises, like, like understand that, like you've got the blood flow back to the leg upward. I mean, are there exercises that we should do to help with um, especially at night, 'cause I guess it's my injury. My leg is swollen.
Uh-huh.
Do I need to or not need to do, could it help to be helpfully, like, have my legs?
Elevated sometimes?
Yeah,
Probably.
or against the wall, or. I don't know, I went down some rabbit hole a little bit, but I don't know what I looked on YouTube, and all of a sudden I start getting all these, the reason for swollen legs.
Uh-huh.
And there was some that suggested these exercises
And are you doing them? Are you doing these exercises?
and the only one I do is if I elevate my leg and foot, but not against the wall. I just thought maybe, because you said you do, or your job was, I thought maybe you had some exercises for recommendation.
I think it falls all into the same category of you got to keep moving, and yes, you want to keep the blood flowing to where it needs to go. Maybe Carrie and Sharon can touch on that one when they talk about vascular issues.
So do you get messages when we do for that, and you say we asked 5 doctors and they all said the same thing? Which is,
Yeah, it's kind of like when you do a Google search, all of a sudden you start getting all these
yeah.
things that same thing with YouTube.
You're right. But aren't you curious about the ones where they say 4 out of 5 doctors recommend?
Absolutely.
What did the 5th doctor, is he the one who really knows what's going on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's just the pattern.
All right. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next time.
But then you have to click on it to see what it is.
Right, and then you have to get a subscription to really see it.
And then there's all these advertisements that you have to go through and over.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Answer.